Hi everybody, I'm Ryan. Today we're going to talk about 4-color Omnath in Modern, which is one of the decks that has catapulted up to tier 1 with the release of the Lord of the Rings set, taking advantage of Delighted Halfling and the One Ring. So we're going to check out this awesome new build of 4-color Omnath, talk about card choices, talk about what the deck is trying to do, and how to play the deck. Let's jump into it. So this is my build of 4-color Omnath. I apologize for the One Rings. It is still very difficult to get them rented on Magic Online. This is really close to what the stock build looks like at the moment. And I want to go through it card for card. Normally I put these cards in categories in my deck text, but in these mid-range decks, they're all really working towards similar ends. First off, we are playing one Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolt, while being powerful, is mostly used as like a pitchable thing to Fury. Fury is kind of better, but there's not a lot of red cards in the deck. And then Lightning Bolt is just all around a powerful removal spell. Not as powerful as like Solitude or Leyline Binding by any means, but it is a one-of. Allows you to be in situations where, you know, if you want that 1-for-1 removal instead of 2-for-1ing yourself with Fury, especially very early in the game. And it is a one-of is totally fine because Lightning Bolt actually gets sided out in a lot of matchups. But as far as our first card that we got from Lord of the Rings, we have Delighted Halfling. Delighted Halfling is a 1-mana 1/2. You can tap to add a colorless mana, or you can tap to add 1 mana of any color and spend this mana only cast a legendary spell, and that spell can't be countered. So legendary spells are super important in this deck, especially when they can't be countered. It allows us to cast Wrenn and 6 that can't be countered, Teferi, Nissa, Omnath, the One Ring, and Elesh Norn. All of these cards that when they hit the battlefield do something hyper relevant, except arguably not Elesh Norn, and effectively making counterspells bad against your deck, which that's one huge way to beat mid-range decks, is to play counter magic that counters the relevant cards. Now most of the relevant cards are uncounterable with Delighted Halfling, so decks have to do something different. So that's super, super exciting, and it ramps our mana, right? Being able to cast these cards a turn earlier is obviously very powerful. We're playing 4 Wrenn and 6. The primary goal of Wrenn and 6, whereas it's +1, return up to 1 land card from your graveyard to your hand. Being able to do that with fetch lands means that we are able to support a 4-color mana base and such a high curve, and being able to cast these very powerful high-cost spells by hitting our land drops every single turn. Also, its minus is reasonable as a ping, can kill Orcish Bowmasters, which matters with the One Ring. It can kill Ragavan. And then if we're able to get all the way up to -7, and we have the emblem where instant sorcery cards in your graveyard have retrace, being able to have cards like that one of Lightning Bolt in the graveyard to recur Lightning Bolt over and over by discarding lands kind of just means you win the game. We're playing 1 Nissa Resurgent Animus. It is a 3-mana 3/3 that has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, add 1 mana of any color. Then, if this is the second time this ability has resolved this turn, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal an elf or an elemental card. Put that card in your hand and the rest of the bottom of your library in a random order. So the reason we're playing 1 is we really don't want to hit a second Nissa off this first Nissa. So 1 is totally fine. And as far as lands entering the battlefield, it's very easy to have 2 lands enter the battlefield because of the fetch lands. So if you play Nissa, play a fetch land, first one happens, so you get 1 mana of any color, fetch, a land enters the battlefield, second land happens, and now you get to reveal cards from the top of your deck until you reveal an elemental or elf card, which we have a bunch of elementals. We have Omnath, we have Solitude, we have Fury. So it's effectively pseudo-tutors, pseudo-cascades, or whatever for one of them. And it gives us that card advantage that this deck and most mid-range decks so desperately need. We're playing 4 Teferi Time Raveler. Teferi Time Raveler is such a powerful card. 3 mana, 4 loyalty. Each opponent can cast spells only at a time. They could cast a sorcery, which neuters a lot of decks, specifically Cascade decks. When they Cascade, they're casting a spell with a spell in the stack, which is not when you can cast a sorcery. So Cascade just doesn't work. It also allows us to not be worried about Orcish Bowmasters with the One Ring. Not be worried about counter magic because counter spells can't be cast at or sorcery speed. This is just a super, super powerful card. You know, it's +1, being able to cast sorcery spells as though they had flash doesn't really affect anything, but it's -3, return up to 1 artifact, creature, enchantment to its owner's hand and draw a card. So it stops us our opponent from doing stuff. It neuters certain decks and gives us card advantage. Very, very powerful. Omnath, the namesake of the deck, is 4 mana, 1 of each color the deck is, everything but black. 4/4. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card. Already replaces itself. That's awesome. And then it has landfall, similar to Nissa. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 4 life if this is the first time this ability is resolved this turn. So obviously great against aggro decks, also replacing itself. The second time the ability resolved this turn, add 1 of each color mana besides black, which means that like it's kind of a ramp because that happens kind of all the time with fetch lands. And then if you sandbag a fetch on the battlefield and you're able to get landfall to happen a 3rd time, in the same turn. It deals 4 damage to each opponent and each planeswalker you don't control. This is just a super, super, super powerful 4-mana card that we can abuse dramatically in the confines of the rest of this deck. The One Ring is the big pickup this deck got as a 4-mana legendary artifact, indestructible. When the One Ring enters the battlefield, if you cast it, gain protection from everything until your next turn. It's essentially a fog, so it enters the battlefield, it fogs, so it saves a bunch of damage normally. Also, what's relevant is like Archon can't target you and all that stuff. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life for each burning counter on the One Ring. Okay. Tap it, put a burning counter on the One Ring, then draw a card for each burning counter on the One Ring. So this card on its surface seems strong, but as a 4 of in a deck like this, surrounded by so many powerful cards, it's kind of confusing that it would be this strong. So this is the reason it's good. 1, it fogs. Awesome. That's great. We get dealt damage by drawing cards, but frankly, we play it. It immediately replaces itself. We draw a card. We take 1 damage on our next upkeep. We tap it to draw 2 more cards because now it has 2 burden counters on it. So now it's drawn 3 cards. It's dealt 1 damage to us. Now, if we choose to not have that damage be dealt to us, we can play a second the One Ring, and because they're legendary, we can sack the old one. Or what's more likely is we let ourselves be dealt 2 more damage, so we've drawn 3 cards, been dealt 3 damage, tap it to draw 3 more cards. So now we've drawn 6 cards, been dealt 3 damage, and now we almost definitely have hit a second the One Ring. Play it, replace it. Now we have a One Ring with 0 burden counters on it, have it replace itself. So now for 8 mana and 3 life, we have drawn 7 cards, and we fogged twice over the course of 3 turns. And that's why this card is really, really good. Because if we draw extra cards in a deck like this, the game is over. So many cards in this deck are so powerful. And capitalizing on that with cards like the One Ring and giving ourselves time with the fog is so, so good. That being said, let's move on to Elesh Norn, Mother of Machines. This is a 5-mana legendary creature, 4/7 with Vigilance. If a permanent entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. Permanents entering the battlefield don't cause abilities of permanents your opponent control to trigger. So this is obviously very good against decks that rely on things entering the battlefield. It's great in the mirror match because almost everything relevant in the deck relies on things entering the battlefield to trigger the One Ring, Omnath, Nissa, Solitude, Fury, Leyline Binding. It turns off when you play against it. Whoops, we do have one more card. It turns all those things off when you play against it, and also makes all these things trigger twice, which doesn't really matter with the One Ring, but for everything else, it really matters. If you play an Elesh Norn, play a Nissa, and just play a normal land, boom, immediately 2 landfall. Solitude, kill 2 things. Fury, 8 damage split. It's so, so good. Leyline Binding, exile 2 things underneath it. If you start going off with Elesh Norn, the game is just over. The issue is we only play it as a 1-of because it in multiples is really, really bad, and also you need it in conjunction with other cards in our deck, which is a little bit scary sometimes. We're playing 4 Solitude. It is a 3/2 5-mana flash lifelink. When Solitude enters the battlefield, exile up to 1 other target creature. That creature's controller gains life equal to its power. So it's just a unconditional removal for 5 mana. Also, it's a flash lifelink, which is dope. And we can evoke, exile a white card from our hand. We have a ton of white cards to be able to do this. So we can do this as early as turn 1 and have unconditional removal, and that's amazing. Fury is his red counterpart. 5 mana 3/3 double strike. When Fury enters the battlefield, deals 4 damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures under planeswalkers. And we can evoke to exile a red card from our hand. And we have a few red cards in our deck, but that's a big reason why we're playing a few less Fury. It's a little bit harder to evoke it. But with all the legendary cards in our deck, we can find a lot of white and red cards that we already have on the battlefield that we don't want to cast a second of in our hand, and we can kind of capitalize on that. And then some additional removal. Leyline Binding is another pretty unconditional removal. Flash Domains cost 1 less for each basic land type among lands you control. We are playing Zagoth Triome as a black land, so we can cast Leyline Binding for 1 mana if we would like. And as an O-Ring, when it enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls until Leyline Binding leaves the battlefield. So it's reasonably good unconditional removal, flash, 1 mana, kind of just a better lightning bolt in this deck, frankly. And then we're playing Prismatic Ending, which is X and white sorcery with Converge, exile target non-land permanent if its mana value is less than or equal to the number of colors of mana spent to cast this spell. So another unconditional removal, a little bit more mana intensive. But we are playing, it's a 4-color deck, but we're effectively playing 5 colors so that we can remove almost anything with it. And it's very powerful and can be retraced with Ren and 6. All very good. As far as our sideboard goes, we're playing Howl of Moonlight for decks like Living End, Rhinos, Creativity, all that stuff like that. If a creature would enter the battlefield, wasn't cast, exile it instead. It's awesome. We're playing a second Elesh Norn, Mother of Machines to side in against decks that it neuters, like the Mirror Match, like Creativity, things like that. Playing a Veil of Summer, very good against the scam decks and very good against counterspell decks. Playing 3 Endurance to deal with the graveyard decks. Force of Vigor for artifacts and enchantments, obviously. Dovin's Veto to fight that counter war if we really want to, or to be able to counter spells that matter out of our opponent's deck, like Creativity or Tron cards or things like that. Speaking of Tron, we can deal with that with Beseiju. Also reasonable artifact and enchantment hate as well. And then we're playing 2 Chalice of the Void. Chalice of the Void we plan on playing for 0 mostly, just as another like end-all be-all way to deal with the many Cascade decks in this format. And all in all, this deck is just a powerful mid-range deck. I would argue it is the premier like traditional mid-range deck of the format. You're trying to get card advantage, you're trying to kill your opponent's stuff, you're trying to play more powerful cards than your opponent and move on. If you like this video, if you like these deck highlights and deck techs, please be sure to like and subscribe. Check me out on social medias. Links are above me and in the description. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.